Okay, so welcome to the third episode of Adventure Culture. Here with me today, I have Mr. Mathias Merbrat, aka Shoddy Wave. He's a very good friend of ours, and he's been making music. One of the most knowledgeable guys about music that I know. So he's here to share some of his past experiences and give some tips and basically show us what it takes to set a foot into the musical industry, I guess. So, Matthias?
Hello, Mebrat.
Hello?
Thank you for the nice introduction, claiming that I'm one of the most knowledgeable people. That's a nice thing to say. But yeah, my name is Mathias. I go by Shoddy Wave, and yeah, I've been making music for about 3 years, working mainly on production and songwriting, and come from an international background, and I hope to really show that in all the work I do. That's one of the major things I kind of focus on, is taking anecdotes from my own personal life and then just trying to manifest that into the work that I make.
And with the music that you make, so what type of music do you make, just for our viewers out there?
The type of music I make, I wouldn't really constrain it to one specific thing, really. I make all sorts of genres because as a producer, you kind of have to be flexible to work with whatever artist, brand, or company you're working with. So it could go anywhere from working on like African style Afro beats to just rap stuff to even now what I've been kind of like doing a lot more is like electronic stuff because started going to raves and got a little
How was that?
the culture. That was very exhilarating. I feel like this summer was definitely a point where I felt like I needed to get a bit more inspiration out of life. And I learned that from a lot of my other creative friends, especially people outside of the music world, that sometimes you really just need to take a pause off of your hustle and just live life, because if you're not doing that, then you're really not going to have anything to talk about with your art, if that makes sense,
Oh, I mean, like clearly we know, like I personally heard your music and I know how hard you and how much dedication you put into music itself. It's really impressive, like seeing the studio setup. And I mean, like 3 years ago you started this doing it professionally, but what about the time before that?
The time before that, to give you like a pretty quick synopsis of it, I don't really come from a super traditional background. My parents like listening to music, but ESL, so all they listen to is Ethiopian music. So I didn't really get exposure to a lot of English-based music until I kind of got older. And even with that, I feel like it's kind of interesting to think about my start. I started doing band and a lot of those things for my own interests, even though a lot of the people around me, my direct family, might not have been in that space. So a lot of my own personal motivation had to come from my own desire to make something that I'm not maybe inherently gifted with, something that I want to like pursue,
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when did you come to Canada from Ethiopia?
I was actually in Uganda before here for about 8 years, but I've only been here for about 3 years. Came second term for my first year because it was mid-COVID, so I didn't even have the chance to get the first term here. But yeah, been here for a little bit.
For 3 years?
3 years, a little over 3 years, but yeah.
A little over 3 years. So like before that, how'd you find the culture between, Uganda and now here? Like, did it inspire you to make music more so here? Would you say the culture, like,
way better.
Canada, way better?
And this is in no way to push down or anything. It's just, I was in a different place at the time, obviously because of COVID and stuff like that. And everything that I was working on, I had to find some way to share it online. And I already knew I was going to eventually end up in Canada for school and stuff. So I basically had to work with only myself because I couldn't even go to studio sessions there. I couldn't really do stuff. So I kind of geared myself to knowing the internet is a super powerful place to meet people. So I even started developing a network and relationships with people that I had no recollection of or actual introduction with in person. And I basically had to work to sustain that until I eventually came here, hoping that they'd eventually see what I saw in myself, and then we could start developing like a real in-person relationship.
So was there a person or event that, caused, you to say like, hey, I want to pursue music now professionally?
Yeah, it's a it's a pretty meaningful thing, I'd say, to an extent, because at the time, senior year was when I first opened my first beat store, and reworking on a lot of that stuff now because I use a third party platform, which I kind of switch now. But I didn't have any money to kind of like buy the sort of stuff that I wanted to. And my brother was already here, and he was working, doing his thing, and he, for my 18th birthday, got me the first license for the DAW I still, like, digital audio workstation I still use today. And I guess that's what inspired me. He already kind of tried to mess with the software before, but never really took an interest in it. But he knew I have this sort of obsessive thing about me where if I really like something or if I really want to get good at it, I don't stop working until I get to the point where I want to go. So, yeah.
No, that's impressive.
Yeah, so shout out my brother, because the biggest supporter too. He has my and his and stuff like that. So yeah,
Definitely you have the work ethics. Knowing you personally, I know you have the good work ethics to support whatever you do.
appreciate it.
And like, what are some like the difficulties? Even with your work ethics, what are some like the difficulties that you personally have found for you?
I think one of the biggest difficulties to begin with is the desire to step outside of my comfort zone. I feel like a lot of people in music share this. It's when you work as a starving artist, I guess, out of your dorm or your bedroom, you really don't want to step outside of that spot because you just want your art to do all of this speaking. Like, I'm pretty well versed in how I speak and like communicate my messages, but at the same time, when it comes to a creative realm, I always just want my art to be a standalone speech and be the thing that can speak and communicate with people without me ever having to say a word. And I guess that's one of the most difficult things. And even with that, it's the ability to create genuine relationships. I don't really like working on anything creative with people if I'm not friends with them outside of that, because then I feel like it's too much of a transactional relationship where I get worried if I don't put enough in, or if your inherent value of what I put in isn't good enough, you're just gonna maybe pull out of the place. Because it's happened before, and I feel like everybody will experience it once or twice in their like creative endeavors.
So you would only work with people that when you produce, only work with people that you get along with and truly enjoy meeting them in a outside setting if you're at a bar or something.
It's even more than that. Even if we meet in a context where we're working on creative stuff, because I don't just do music. I do cinematography, all sorts of stuff, photography, and everybody that I work with outside of the art, we're friends. And that's one thing that I found to be the biggest thing that's important, because you don't control how your day goes. You don't know what life's going to throw at you. And when you're working with people who don't have a sustained relationship outside of the art, all they'll do is criticize you for not delivering. But a real friend can empathize with the fact that life is hard. Like, shit happens, and maybe you do need to take a break for something, or maybe today just isn't the day because you just don't feel it. And I mean, that keeps me motivated too, just knowing that I have that supportive safety net almost with the people that I work with.
So with people you work with, I mean, like, do you have a criteria to determine what's going to be a good client or a good friend in the future?
It depends on the merit of like what our transaction or like our thing is. For a lot of my friends who have a desire to work on music and maybe they're not as well versed in the area, I'm willing to just kind of, we're just friends and we're just like kind of throwing each other's back and forth. But as I've kind of gone better, I've had the opportunity to go to songwriting camps and studio sessions where I'm working more hands-on with artists. And in that place, it's more, we're thinking bigger picture. We're thinking, how can we impact people and stuff like that? So yeah, could I say there's some criteria? I guess there is one thing, and if it's something that they all share, it's just, do they love it as much as I do? Whether it's me doing photography with you or some other thing, it's, do you have that same like obsessive thing, which not a lot of people have, and you can really see it whether somebody has it or they don't. And if you don't have it, then that's completely fine because it's a thing that'll grow with your ability to get better at something. But I don't know. I like to keep it kind of like that. Just people at the same best of nature. Yeah, because if you're the same as me, I feel like we're in a good place to work.
Yeah, just somebody that shares the same degree.
Yeah.
They're passionate towards, whatever you like, and which is, in this case, producing.
And even people better than me in that case, because I feel like the only people I really learned the most from are some of my friends who are way better than me in whatever it is. And it's never a jealousy thing because it's more just you almost put them up on a standard where you're like, dude, you motivate me to want to be like that version that you are for yourself, for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like in life. I mean, we can't always be the best. There's a saying in Chinese. It's when it comes to studying, there is no number one. When it comes to learning, there is no like tip that you can reach. It's
Totally agree, man.
every mountain behind every mountain is a taller mountain.
Yep.
And
every mountain has a different peak, bro. Like that's
definitely,
the thing. Yeah.
And with the connection that you built, are there any particular categories that you would put them in terms of like the type of people they are?
Yeah. Okay. And I'll break it down for my people who just want to know how the money side works, and then for the people who want to know how the like relationship side, where it might not work that same way. So for the most part, I work with people either just simply allowing them to just license music for me. And I used to just purely base it off of my website, but I realized my conversion was a lot better if I niched it down to people who'd already bought stuff from me and just work on a mailing list like any business does and just market to them specifically. And the bigger thing that I want to work on outside of just trying to make money off of the music is development and have some form of like a legacy type longevity with the people I work with. So those are my more like working with my more talented friends and stuff where I'm not really concerned about the monetary value because I see the bigger vision. And I feel like a lot of people need to take that into account is you sell yourself out from a lot of good positions by only being worried about how much money you can make. Because you look at big corporations and startups, the CEO never gets paid until either they sell the company or they get big enough to where their share values are insane, and then he can start getting money. And I kind of look at music the same way, where if you're growing and trying to develop an artist, you shouldn't be thinking about charging them at every point you could or charging them like that, because you really need to put that shit aside and just focus on the art at the end of the day, because that's what's going to eventually make you the money.
It's about the art, not about money.
Yep.
But has there been a point in your life where, that belief or that balance kind of gets disrupted, and like if so, how'd you cope with it?
This is actually a good point. I feel like a lot of the balance comes from the difficulty of people leveraging having a friendship with you in order to get something out of you. Like, I understand, especially from people who understand the work rate or even the volume of like product, I guess, off the music I have, that everything is so dispensable and that I can just be working, and then there's nothing given back to me. And when you get pushed to that point, it's just kind of like, okay, you're just kind of taking as much out of me and never really giving anything back. And then I'm like, where is this? Like, the line starts to get blurred, especially when you look at it as this is somebody who's your friend. You're just like, dang, like, are you really valuing me to the same extent that I need to be valued, or are you just exploiting the fact that that I can really work at that rate? And people just, it's pretty common, bro. And my best analogy, especially, because I've had cases where I've had to tell my friends, yo, I'm working on a lot of bigger projects right now, or just stuff that I'm trying to work to monetize, because I have to make money at the end of the day, right? And they kind of get hurt because they feel like I'm pushing them off to the side. But then it's like, you never really walk into a clothing store and ask them, hey, can I get this shirt? Even if your friend owns a store, it's like, why you don't do that? You respect the business and stuff. And kind of people having a confusion with that is what makes it difficult, because then you don't feel like you get the need or value that you deserve from a relationship with somebody.
But do you find that the value of your music, how would you value your music like on the market? How would you put a accurate monetary value? Like, is there a criteria for determining the price point that you said?
Sorry about that. I feel like it's purely dependent. For a lot of people, I understand like everybody has constraints with how much they can spend and stuff. So when I started, especially this year, pushing away from doing a lot of just free work, unless it's like there's a long-term value for me, I realized I still don't want to be cutting off people just because I'm not getting paid the insane amount I want to get paid for a beat. So I would work and just be like, yo, let's see what your budget is and let's make that work for the both of us, because music's a pay-to-play game. Like every creative industry is a pay-to-play game. You have to pay people to film your videos, set designers, all sorts of stuff. And in a lot of cases, the producers are always people who get overlooked. And I've had cases where people just choose not to pay or anything. And I'll be like, well, you just burned a bridge. And I just want people to feel like when they're putting that value into me, they're going to always get a return. And everybody who does knows that they're getting a return and they feel happy. And that, I feel like on a bigger note, taught me the importance of knowing who your client is, because I would rather work with people who see how much my stuff is worth and they pay, and I'd wait for those longer periods where I might not be making like smaller, like meaningless sales, because they will always have some form of a brand loyalty. It's a brand loyalty thing and a marketing thing at the end of the day, where they won't put you down for a value that suits them. They see you at what you value yourself and they subscribe to that without any argument. That makes sense, yeah?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing here is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the relationships are, of course, only are for friendships, and they're for, building that future connection, but in a sense, they are also investments, both for you and also for your client.
Exactly, because it's not easy work. It takes, like, I think a lot of the things that people won't account for is, you look at the life of a producer when they're getting all the stuff they need, hundreds of dollars spent on software, equipment, buying new sounds and stuff just to make your stuff better. And all they'll think about is that short time frame it might take you to make an instrumental or whatever, or help them write something. It's like, yeah, you're looking at all of that, but there's a backlog of years to perfect your craft. And like any brand, you have to respect it. If you don't respect it, that's completely fine. You're just not my market then. I would just rather market to people who see it, because trying to force, especially when it's somebody that you're friends with, trying to force them to bringing down their value just off of the merit that you guys are friends, it's just detrimental. You're just asking them to basically sell short,
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, with the value that you portray, right? Like, in, of course, marketing and everything in life, it's the value that, it's a message behind the value that needs to be conveyed, and also, like, to demonstrate to somebody that whatever item that you might be trying to sell them has value for them, and that's, approaching it from the marketing perspective. So is there an approach that you like actually do?
I feel like the main thing is I sustain a lot of relationships. That's the back to that point, is just when somebody buys something from me, I'm not just looking at them as a statistic or number. It's more just, how can I make sure we help each other and work together so that we're both happy with whatever we create? Because at the end of the day, it's a group or team effort, and nobody should be left to be pushed down in any regard. And for the most part, I guess that's what helps me kind of direct my marketing stuff, is reiterating, staying in touch with people, finding some way to just like find a common ground, even if it's just like, oh, we play the same video games, let's hop on the game together. Just small things to match us up as people so that we can have a long-lasting relationship.
All of those things which require time.
Yeah, it's time at the end of the day. And I mean, if you don't put in the time, then you might not get what you want,
Yeah. I mean, you're a student right now with a lot of like academic course loads and external projects, and so where you had co-op. Like, how do you find time to balance everything?
It's tough because the one biggest thing I realized is if you look at a student's life, for most people, it's just like a pyramid or a triangle where it's just your social life, school, and just being healthy, like going out to the gym and stuff like that. That dimension changes when you're a creative because you add in an extra component and it turns into a square, which, if you think about it, takes a lot longer to get around the square than it will going around the triangle. And you only have 24 hours in the day. So it's stressful because sometimes you get demotivated because you're not putting in as much work to be where you want to be. And you just kind of put yourself down. But at the end of the day, I feel like the biggest revelation I had throughout all of that was there's a right time for everything. As a student now, my main priority is finishing my school and being able to do that as competently as I want to, because that's just one dimension of me I don't want to be poor performing on. And at the same regard, when there's a time for me to be able to put more stuff into music, then I can reach that, and then I'll be able to put more time. I'll be able to put more money. And like, to even further say it, it's not like I've developed and grown my brand to the point where I want it to be. And that's already enough motivation to me where I don't minimize and be like, man, I'm never going to make it, or I'm never going to be able to grow this baby of mine to the point I want it to. It's just, there'll be a time where I can water it better. And I know like whatever comes of that will be way better than whatever I've been able to do in this exact moment.
So, at the, I guess on rainy days, it's about staying motivated.
Yep.
That you think best helped you move through some of the mental obstacles.
It's telling yourself you're a human, man. Like, I go home telling myself some days I haven't sent beats to people or made melodies to send to people. And I just get overwhelmed just being like, man, I'm not sustaining my relationships. But it's like, how am I not going to live my life or get parts of life out of the way in order to put that into your art? Because without living a meaningful life, your art just has no value because you're not really speaking or communicating anything to your listener, you know?
Yeah, your art. You find that your art, when you're in that mind state, have no meaning to your viewers, then does it have meaning to yourself at that point? Does it still have meaning to yourself, I should say?
I feel like it doesn't. I feel like my listeners' meaning comes from what I'm telling them, because it feels like a story to me. When I listen to stuff that I make, for the most part, what it feels like to me is I put every single bottled up emotion at that exact moment into that thing. And that's kind of where the value for me comes from, because you don't bottle up or you don't put a piece of yourself into a piece of work and then just dish it out or just like disrespect it, right? And that's like the same thing that I guess works against me, because then I don't want to be sending stuff out to people or reaching out to people, because I only want them to hear the good and the parts of my art and like expression that I really feel best describes me. It's not even a quality thing more than that. It's just the accuracy as to how I'm putting myself into it, you know?
So the quality, a high quality work to you is something that you've, put 100% and put your heart and soul into, and that's quality. And you said that sometimes on the rainy days, where you can't put in quality of work, high quality of work, like they kind of lose value to you as well.
Because it doesn't even feel like it's a part of me. It feels like it's a chore. And I like that I have a healthy relationship with all the creative work that I do. And I would much rather sustain that than turn it into a toxic thing where I feel like I need to endlessly work. Because after a certain point, you're human. You're going to break. You're going to start wondering why you haven't started it. And for a lot of people, that's their downfall, where they just never work past that point because they've just burned themselves out to completion. And
so how do you regain that control?
Living life, man. Like, I used to, for the longest time, be so obsessed with music and all the other creative stuff that I was doing that I kind of just harbored in my introverted side, but that kind of made me lose sight of my extroverted side too, of socializing and going out and doing stuff that I do genuinely love. And one thing you start to realize is you can't have one without the other. If you don't have a life that you're living, then your art has no meaning or no value. And that genuinely is my perspective on it. And I'm fully, I believe, entitled to view it that way, because I've seen the times in life where I haven't done enough for me, even if on the basis of just having structured self-care. And then I'm like, man, I know you can hear this in my music. And I know that I don't want anyone to hear this, because I feel like they'll be able to see that reflection that I'm seeing in myself.
Are there any strategies and tips, you know, when you're regaining that habit, when you're trying to regain? What's the simplest strategy?
It's the simplest thing ever. And close your fucking computer and get outside. Get outside. This summer, compared to every other summer since I've been working on music, might have been the least productive in volume, but the highest quality, and also the most, even with the smaller volume, the most money I've made, because I was making pieces that I felt were super good, and then I go on my mailing list and I contact people and I'd be like, yo, yada, 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 pitch the whole beat to them, and whatever price I said. And the best part about it was, it's not like I was chasing smaller goals with the same exact people. I was setting a bigger stage for what I wanted to deliver. And you set it up right like that, then you can knock it down so easy that you'll just be like, dang, like, it's not really as hard as I really thought it out to be and stuff like that. And with the internet too, the greatest part is you don't have to be anybody. You don't have to be somebody with all these crazy accolades, because half my mailing list didn't know or have no idea. All they know me as is some kid who lives in Canada and is still just doing uni and stuff like that, and I just post memes on my story. But when they listen to the stuff I make, they're like, man, like, I don't even know where I could go to get this. They're like, I go on YouTube and I see all these really good producers too, and it's same quality, but they're like, I'm getting just as much and you're doing more to me and stuff like that. And that's the thing, at the end of the day, it's kind of finding a way, as when you're treating yourself as a brand, to just stand out and make people gravitate towards you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I know you brand yourself really well.
Very selectively.
Very selectively.
Yeah.
And like you, when it comes to music itself, you are, I would say, one of the most up and coming and high achieving in terms of the quality of stuff. And I can tell by the amount of times you switch up your production style, the types of beats you produce. Because I mean, looking back a year ago, you were producing which types of beats, you would say exactly?
Just mainly doing rap, trap, never touched electronic music.
And now you're
doing electronic.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. There's no real
the raves changed you.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I had to live life to get to that point where I could put it into the work that I do. And the greatest part about any of this advice and anything that I'm saying is, you don't have to just do music for it to be applicable. You don't have to just be an artist or a creative to make it applicable. If you gotta hustle, it's the exact same thing. People will drown themselves in trying to make their startup or business run. Eventually, you're just gonna destroy yourself, and you're gonna have like an absolute distaste to wanting to give it more. You have to allow it to give you as much as you're putting into it. And if you feel like you need breaks, then take those breaks, or else you're just gonna absolutely tire yourself out.
Of course. I mean, hey, what kind of breaks do you take?
A lot of my breaks, socializing with my friends, finding other things that I'm interested in. The biggest one could probably be, I realized I don't feel like my creative direction just ends with music. So then I was like, why don't I start doing photography? Why don't I start doing cinematography? And then I just picked that up. And then any times you feel like you're in a low in one area, you can work on the other area, treat that high. So then it just goes and it switches. It's like a seesaw for me. So then the best part about it that I realized too now is, even with that first seesawing motion, eventually you start to level out because you get so inspired from one of the areas you work in that it just manifests into the other part. And then it's almost like an infinity loop where you like the two perfectly like that. Yeah.
So what if you do blend the two, right? There might be difficulties. I'm speaking from my personal experience that really time
obviously
was a thing because we talked about you were talking about the square. It using music as another factor, and that's one point. Well, another point now, if you introduce photography, now it's a pentagon. And if you're doing the pentagon, like how do you know how much effort to put into each one?
I kind of look at the effort that I put, and this is with generally everything in life. I look at the effort that I put into something based off of my desire to have it. And I feel like that's a mindset that can benefit a lot of people. If you want to do good in school, get a job that your degree gives you, then focus in class. And it's the same thing. If I have a desire to work on my photography catalog per se, like for example, then all I'm going to do is work on that area. Because your motivation and your desire, at least I believe, are strongly tied together. And your desire to do something will affect how motivated you are to do it. And even if you add an extra dimension to it with having another creative form, the thing is, you won't be overpowered to making it a bigger loop unless you're not giving yourself enough breaks. You'll actually be able to do it effectively because you've given yourself all that time.
And have there been times when, say, you didn't give yourself enough time?
Yeah, happens all the time with school.
I'm a lot.
Yeah, with school, school has a very interesting effect, and I say that knowing a lot of my friends who do a lot of the similar stuff I do don't have to deal with school as an extra thing. And I think that's the part that kind of messes with your head the most. When you look at other people and you see maybe how different one part of their life would be, you'll be like, man, like, this thing is just such a burden. And you feel like you have a lot of dead weight you wish you could get rid of, but then you kind of have to check yourself consistently. It's all that at the end of it, just be like, yo, I still want this. And I still want this, and I still want this. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want something, drop it. Drop it. Focus on the things you want to. But my motivations just come from every time I feel way too low about that stuff, I don't just take a break where I stop to. I just reflect, be like, what's leading me to get to this pit stop with my work? And giving myself that time to breathe will just allow me to also recharge in the process. And by the time I'm back, I'm attacking it even harder because my mindset is already set at, I want this even more bad. And I don't want to get my emotions to push me back down to where I was last time. And those stretches eventually end up going and becoming shorter and shorter and shorter to where you don't have large periods where you're demotivated and have no ability to put into your work. You're actually just taking a break because you've allowed yourself to, and you deserve it at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, if we're taking a break, how do you know when to get back? Or, I mean, how do you know when to
hop back on the horse
with a project?
It depends. If time is not a constraint for me, I give myself as much time till I feel content. And for the most part, I know I've missed out on a lot of opportunities because either I was overwhelmed that I wasn't ready, or I felt like I didn't have enough time to prepare. But that's where I also realized there's a lot of, I guess, this gray time periods where nothing's really going on. And those are the points where you can work your hardest and your motivation can skyrocket. Because you don't have anything affecting you emotionally to put you in a loop where you won't be able to give in that time. And I usually capitalize on those things. So summer, my December breaks for now with the school at least, it's so weird to even try to describe what goes on in my mind when I don't have the stress of an extra component in life, because I make more in a month than I probably would across a term, which when I try to rationalize, I go, dang, like, was I just not motivated? But then I realized it wasn't really just motivation. It's just even another factor of just even stress. And it's all just multidimensional, you know? Like, you can't just think that it's one factor affecting the other because there's so many sides to it. It's not 2D, it's 3D, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right, so we're going to take a break right here, and after we're back, we're gonna hop back right to it.